Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we have, of course, some updates, some news, and of course, some opinions. Heading over, of course, we got the Super Bowl this Sunday involving the Philadelphia Eagles against the Kansas City Chiefs for the first time, and of course, the All-Star weekend. We already had big news over 2 second-round picks and a first-round pick, Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith for Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris from the Brooklyn Nets in the Dallas Mavericks trade. I already put a poll. It seems like a majority see Dallas winning it thanks to get a pivotal second option on-ball scorer that needs the ball in his hand. Kyrie's also a decent catch and shooter. Knowing how conservative Ben Simmons is, Kevin Durant leaking an injury, and just lack of support over the Steve Nash debacle, over the controversy. The Nets had blackballing Kyrie with no support off the Nets organization. And just, I don't think he just wanted to continue with the mediocrity of, even though they were fourth best in the Eastern Conference, they are fourth best in the Eastern Conference beforehand over the trade. Still a decent basketball team. I just don't think Kyrie just wanted to deal with it. He just wanted to be in a more continuous situation where it felt like he had a better option. That's just my opinion. I understand that most people think he's going to hoop. I just feel like Kyrie's looking for a more comfortable long-term option over his expiring contract. And even the controversy sitting that this was out of nowhere. I think most people should have expected this, knowing the Nets' history with trying to undersell a regular season. So, yeah, that's my opinion over this. The short-term, decent role players back that can play over to the second unit, that can play make and leave the pressure off Ben Simmons, I guess, with Spencer Dinwiddie that is returning from the Brooklyn Nets, and Dorian Finney-Smith, that's a great playmaker, catch and shooter, good on the defensive side of the ball. And you know, it does a lot to benefit, because I feel like defensively the Nets have their weak spots. I feel like more consistently the Mavericks won this trade just by the attraction side of things. You got two of the best on-ball ball handlers that can make and make their own plays, can formulate their way into second units, and I feel like there's just more rotation pieces that can be selected. Thanks you got rid of two playmaking wings that are better off with teams that have a lack of shooting splits like the Nets. Even though they had Kyrie and KD, KD has a health issue even to this day. So I guess a more comfortable situation for Kyrie other than Kevin Durant. That's also been noted to go for a trade. So could the Nets just fall off, come around next season if postseason doesn't go right? Because it's just Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons. Even though Dinwiddie, I feel like, is the more optional guy they're going to push over to the scoring splits. Thanks Dinwiddie actually had games where he dropped 30 points, 20-something points. Decent shooting splits. 4 for 4, he went 4 for 3. He'll make at least 5 threes. He's good at what he can do. And he's a notable leader over his tenure. Dinwiddie literally looks like a guy in the 80s playing in the 2020s. It's weird, but he looks like a throwback player. And in shorter note, veteran All-Pro receiver, 7-time Pro Bowler, AJ Green, when I feel like one of the more pivotal and most exciting receivers around the 2010s, has retired recently. Sucks to hear. He spent his last 3 seasons as an Arizona Cardinal. Had some low lights after a 7-game winning streak over the 2021 season. It came with a terrible miss route with him getting a game-ending interception against the Green Bay Packers, where he costed the team the game. But he had some great squads over with Andy Dalton, Tyler Eifert, when Giovanni Bernard was their halfback. The Bengals were pretty much dominating over the early to mid 2010s with their team when Dalton was there. Marvin Jones was their head coach, but they kept struggling over with the mediocrity, and the fan base was just getting sick and tired of it, and especially with their front office decisions. So you can see why AJ Green, but he never had like dominant, numbers like what Calvin Johnson was getting around that era, or Julio Jones that was tearing up over the league with Matt Ryan and was, I feel like, more effective over their offense. So that's my opinion. I feel like AJ Green could be in the Hall of Fame, if possibly a lot longer than anybody anticipated. Thinks I feel like his career's a bit overshadowed, but it's great to hear. It's great to at least see that he's leaving at least on a healthy note. A bit under the radar. I wish AJ Green was a bit more notoriety for his career, but not really eye catching. Most of his career really was in the grand scheme of things. I bet a lot of fans wish it was. And I'm not gonna lie, there's been some snubs over this All-Star break. Of course, the reserves have been confirmed in the All-Star team. Sometimes I feel like this popularity contest is just out of nowhere, instead of like actually focusing on the people that actually contribute a major piece into teams. With Anthony Edwards, I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't mind seeing him. Trae Young, I kind of agree with him getting snubbed because he hasn't been much of a major role, hasn't been much of a highlight maker, even though he does the same crap. Even though DeJounte Murray kind of carries over the load whenever trying to extend the lead. Pascal Siakam. I know the Raptors are kind of under the radar and they haven't been that much of an exciting unit, but Pascal Siakam, he's dropped some 40-point games. He went 5 straight, even dropping over 35. The guy is a straight bucket. Great playmaker. Raptors, I guess if they were a more pivotal team, Pascal Siakam would not be getting snubbed, and I would not be seeing Drew Holiday over James Harden. James Harden, I feel like, has been a major reason why the Sixers have been very successful. His pick and roll combo with Joel Embiid has been just as great as Joel Embiid. His ISO performances have been, actually legitimate good extended leads, and his playmaking has been, distribution other than his scoring he's done over majority of his career. And I feel like it's the second best thing about his arsenal. He's been more distributive around his time in Philly, and he come over 8 assist performances. Hell, he had 8 assists before he came over with, I think he ended with 14 total points against the New York Knicks. That was their Knicks' last game until they faced the Orlando Magic, I think tonight. And then we got De'Aaron Fox. That's been a major key component with some great show-out performances after a bit of disappointment over the past couple seasons what he had with Buddy Hield. But as soon as he had Domantas Sabonis, he's more open to cutting around the speed. He's a very fast guard. Shooting has just been great. He's been putting up great production as of late this season. He's just been very effective, and he's had some great play. He's been having some great games. I understand there's some players on the Western Conference that's been very impressive as of late, but man, they had Anthony Davis at least having 2 point something million, like at least 4 point something or 15 point million votes, that he barely even played a handful of games over missing like what, a month and a half of basketball, while some of these guys get underwhelmed and they play consistent. Bam Adebayo deserves it. Just Harden doesn't get in makes zero sense to me. As well as, like, even though Kevin Durant has had some show-off performances, I feel like certain players deserve it a bit more. I know Drew Holiday. A lot of people are also going to bring up Jalen Brunson, that I feel like got a bit snubbed. I'm not going to lie. Brunson has had some showcasing performances among 40-point performances, leading a win percentage over for the Knicks that hasn't been done in several seasons. Has been a major component of coming out of 15-point deficits, especially against the Sixers that are a top seed in the Eastern Conference. So, just being like a key contributor or at least a high productive player, I don't doesn't account for much unless you're a well-established name. Somehow Paul George making. I'm not saying Paul George isn't hooping, but it just they've been load managing majority of these players. I think if Paul George started only 40 around 36 games or at least 32 games. That's at least a bare minimum. 39 games. Over 23 points per game. 23.3 points per game off average shooting. And that's coming over the previous season where he missed the All-Star game. And he made the All-Star game only playing 54. And it was an injury-riddled team around 2020-2021. And that was off the shortened season. So there's got to be some type of confusion here that I'm not understanding. And I understand Paul George is still a recognized name in the NBA, but I just feel like there's certain players that deserve it. I'm sure De'Aaron Fox, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I'm just glad he made it. Very impressive player on the Thunder. Deserves to be a reserve, but I feel like he deserves to be a starter. How he's making all NBA numbers, but nobody watching the Thunder play because they're a bit of a lower market team. They're not really fringe to make it as a top seed, but Dort, Josh Giddey, a lot of upstart talent that can make a move if they get possibly one or two stars there, depending if they give OKC a chance. And we also got Jalen Brunson. That coming out of his $100 million contract, over playing 51 games, that is double the production and double the consistency. 84-point efficiency, 40 from 3, 47 from field goal range, 6.2 assists off 23 points a game. Are you kidding me? Over his time on the Knicks, he's gotten several wins, and it ended up with a 29-26 record. I know the Clippers are a topper seed, but come on, man, this is just ridiculous. Brunson got ultimately snubbed. He got some breakout performances over this season, and you guys cannot deny that. But that's just my opinion. We also got, of course, the Super Bowl. That majority over the polls, over 61% already have the Kansas City Chiefs winning, even though Juju Smith-Schuster got hurt. They ultimately have a more experienced rushing scheme, and a loss of their defensive front. I feel like the Chiefs secondary is a bit questionable. And of course, we still have to consider ourselves a bit concerned over the ankle sprain that Mahomes been suffering over since the divisional round. Defensive form is a must. Offensive line is a must to keep Mahomes from rolling out consistently. I know Mahomes has still brought up some breakout performances even while suffering such a injury like an ankle sprain. Is still showing out. So it's going to be that interesting, at least for the storylines of, oh my god, the Kelsey brothers are playing against each other. There's going to be two black quarterbacks. Nick Bosa considered a racist for not watching the team that beat him playing the Super Bowl. Is ridiculous, though. That's still insanity to me. I feel like more people would have, even though the Eagles, I feel like are a highly more constructive team, have a more aggressive defensive unit. Even though a bit more inexperienced, the Eagles have been a more dominant team, especially around the postseason, while playing off against Niners team with lack of discipline, a lack of a quarterback, and now right now possibly a lack of an identity because we're not going to get Brock Purdy for a season now. Trey Lance is a bona fide failure for the 49ers. Is either trade him to get some sorts of assets and late round picks, or at least trade Garoppolo and let Trey Lance learn to get all at least an All Pro, to see what type of talent we can still keep over on the Niners team, and of course the Eagles looking dominant again over on the divisional round against the New York Giants, even though they beat the team already twice over double digit, at least 3 score leads over the regular season. So this would be possibly we thought the Niners would be a more difficult team for the Eagles to match up against, but yeah, just knowing this is gonna be the possibly more exciting game over the season. Health wise, I'm more concerned. I personally have the Eagles winning by at least 2 scores of at least I'm gonna say 34-21. If the Chiefs stay healthy, or at least keep it conservative, I see this the Chiefs could tear it up. I don't know. This could go either way, depending if the Eagles remain consistent with their schemes. Knowing like both coaches have played for these organizations before, and but this time Sirianni is the head coach. Doug Williams coaches the Jaguars now, and Andy Reid hasn't been a head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles since I would say around 2014, 2015, and has been the Super Bowl at least 4 times since then. So depending on how this goes, I just feel like the Eagles just have a bit of the upper hand here against the Chiefs, and I bet a lot of fans bring that up too. Even though the more the argument would be that the Chiefs have more experience, and sometimes that does play over a factor. But they've only won 1 Super Bowl over their last 3 appearances, and that was getting last 2 appearances. They got gobsmacked by the Buccaneers that just outplayed them after just showing out after a comeback. If it wasn't for Mike Shanahan's incompetence of trying to hold over the lead, the San Francisco 49ers could have won a Super Bowl. I'm not going to lie there. So will we get old Andy Reid, or we will get finally the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty that should have been expected off teams like this? Because that would have been suspected with the Green Bay Packers around the early 2000s. I mean, the early 2010s. With the roster constructed, an actual good all-pro defense, competent receivers with still one of the more dominant quarterbacks in the NFC, my fault, with Aaron Rodgers. And now we don't even know what's going to happen with him. Because we possibly have Derek Carr heading off over to the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers heading over to the New York Jets. Tom Brady already out of the question about him even being a Raider or going anywhere. Over his discussed retirement during the postseason. So that's going to be very interesting to know what's going to happen, because usually the highlight of the NFL season always happens in the postseason because of all of the expectations, all the money getting distributed, and of course the fantasy options of what best player is going to go to your favorite team. So that's always going to build up a lot of conversation around the offseason. I feel like certain teams should also be constructing what faults that got them either miss the postseason or even lose the postseason. So that's always more of a concern to me than just always getting a starting quarterback. Because if you put up no supporting cast with your quarterback, what's the point of signing him in the first place? I'm just saying. Because of course we got Marcus Peters coming out of the Baltimore Ravens. Von Bell, that's been an All-Pro safety for the Bengals. Jonathan Jones, Patrick Peterson, veteran that still had some show out games for the Vikings. Hasn't he got like 4 picks? Yeah, he had a collective interceptions over the regular season. I'm not gonna lie. Patrick Peterson did show out to get some major show out games for the Vikings. And over the 2022 season, Patrick Peterson had around 66 tackles with 56 by himself. About 10 assisted with about 3 tackles for loss. That's a career high for him tied. And a yardle average around 6. Not really as effective as early in his career when he was a consistent Pro Bowler. Always effective around the blitz, and now he's just an effective veteran. And had a show out with 5 interceptions over playing 17 games. He hasn't been that consistent since his 2020, yeah, around his 2018 or 2019 season when he was in Arizona. And that was when Tyrann Mathieu was with him. Now, I think Tyrann Mathieu was still in Kansas City around 2019, 2018. And, yeah. I don't know if he still has enough in the tank. 32-year-old corners that put up that much consistent production, especially around playing 17 games. Patrick Peterson still has the size. Very efficient. Always a great ball hawk. Good off reads and will make you look silly whenever you give him a terrible fly ball. So, depending on where he goes, I would just say Minnesota has been doing great keeping him. Marcus Peters, I don't know where he's going to go, just not for the Baltimore Ravens. He's been undisciplined. He's bad over deep balls. Always, being inefficient, getting bad pass interference calls whenever necessary. It just gets agitating whenever Patrick Peterson, Marcus Peters makes a play. Baker Mayfield's still over his expiring contract, even though he was traded off his remainder after getting bought out over his $10 million contract when he played for the Carolina Panthers. Dependent we're still going to see what's going to be happening with Baker Mayfield after the Rams had their starting quarterback get injured in the early half of the season when we thought the Rams were still going to be contenders. But I don't know, anything could happen. We could see it probably a 2-year extension. But Matthew Stafford, I don't know, a major injury like that could cost him. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's possibly going to be playing for a consistent team that's going to be systemed around him. Bridgewater possibly to Denver. Sean Payton's there. Daniel Jones is obviously going to get re-signed. Obviously, to do screen passes and probably make the Giants a mid-contender or a division leader, depending if the Cowboys shit the bed again. And Geno Smith, possibly going to get re-signed after a breakout performance. I still don't know why Tyler Huntley made the Pro Bowl after 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And getting shut out in wild card. Like, all because he played the second half of Lamar Jackson's season. Makes a lot of sense, right? After Lamar Jackson was putting up league MVP numbers before his injury. Like, he was just a substitute to go with it. Like, come on. Joe Flacco, 38-year-old quarterback. I don't know if he's still going to play over with the Jets. Zach Wilson hasn't even been half of the quarterback that Brock Purdy was in the second half of the 2022 season. Lamar Jackson's question to still stay over in an extension, let alone a franchise tag, knowing how much he's been producing. So, yeah, a lot of questions over this offseason, especially in the quarterback position. You guys tell me down below who's going where. That's it from the DSD show. I'm going to take some medicine. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week.